So you want to know all about sports card grading? Well, you've come to the right place because on today's episode of Sports Cards 101, we're going over why people grade, who the graders are, how to read the labels, and whether you should be grading your cards or not. So thanks for stopping by. Let's get into it. Hey guys, it's Mr. Hollywood and welcome back to another episode of Sports Cards 101. I don't even know what episode we're on anymore. There's only been a handful of them, so it's kind of pathetic. I can't really count very well. For those of you who do not know how graded cards work, why people grade them, who grades them, etc., how to read these labels, this episode is specifically for you. It's gonna be a crash course on graded cards. They don't need to be like solving a Pythagorean theorem or reading the labels. Doesn't need to look like you're trying to read Sanskrit from thousands of years ago. So today we're gonna help you make sense of all of that. Let's start with, we're just gonna jump right into it. Let's start number one with why, okay? Why do people grade their cards? Typically, they grade them for one of three reasons, and it can be a combination of these reasons as well. Number one is to authenticate their cards. So when you send a card in for grading, for example, we'll use PSA as an example. PSA is one of the major grading companies, probably the biggest one. They take that card into their facility and it passes through a series of stations. In those stations, the card is authenticated. It means they make sure that that is actually an authentic card. And they can slab it up. Obviously, if it's authentic. If it's not authentic, they'll let you know and they will not slab it up. So number one is for authentication. Number two is to increase the value of cards. A higher grade means a higher price. So a PSA 10 graded 1986 Fleer Michael Jordan card is going to be worth a heck of a lot more than a 1986 Fleer Michael Jordan PSA 9 card, okay? So that's number two. So people do it, number one, to authenticate, number two, to increase the value, number three, to protect their cards, okay? When you get them slabbed up in a graded card holder, that protects your card. It is sonically sealed into the holder and you don't have to worry about it any longer. So I'm gonna bring a few cards onto the screen now so you can see what I'm talking about. We'll bring this, and we'll bring this, okay? So here's what I'm talking about. You pull a card, we'll use this. You pull a card out of a pack and it's gonna look something like this, okay? Raw card, straight out of the pack, looks pretty good. You look it over, you think, I wanna grade this card. So what do? You send it in. Well, first you're gonna put it into your penny sleeve and your top loader just like this, right? Then you're gonna send it in to PSA to get graded. PSA then slabs it if it is authentic. So this is authentic, they slabbed it and they assigned it a grade here. You can see there, Gem Mint 10. So this graded a 10. Why did I submit this card? Well, number one, to authenticate it. There have been some fake Victor Wembanyama cards running around. Number two, to increase the value of it, okay? So I'll put up on the screen when this video actually goes live. This card right here in raw condition, this one, is worth about, I wanna say around $30 for this base card raw. But in a PSA 10, like this card is worth over $130. Why would someone pay more for this over this? Because this has been graded a PSA 10. Card grading significantly affects the price of the card, okay? And every card is a little different. The 1986 Fleer Michael Jordan card, I don't have one on me right now, but I'll throw it up on the screen for you. In a PSA 9, that card costs about $16,000. That's Michael Jordan's rookie card in a PSA 9. In a PSA 10, get ready for this, over $200,000 $1,000 for a PSA 10 1986 Fleer Michael Jordan, okay? So number one, it's authenticating the card. Number two, it's increasing the value of the card. And number three, it is protecting the card and preserving the condition that that card is in. I wanted to preserve the condition that this card was in. So it got slabbed, it increased the value, and it got authenticated. There you go, 1, 2, 3. Another reason people send cards in for grading is for aesthetics. Okay, so the fourth category, I guess, would be aesthetics. Here's a raw card, right? This is the raw version of this. You can also do something like this, right? And it's, what I mean by aesthetics is how the card is presented, how it looks, okay? Here is the raw card in in what's called a top loader, a semi-rigid top loader and a penny sleeve. Very thin, not a whole lot of display value, right? You can kind of set it up on a stand and it's a little flat, for lack of a better explanation. What's the next step up is probably to put it in what's called a one-touch holder. Okay, so this is a one-touch holder. It frames the card a lot more nicely. It's magnetic, so it just kind of pulls apart just like so. But generally speaking, it just looks nicer, kind of frames it up better than just a top loader. So this would be kind of your next step up in terms of not grading the card. So one touch versus top loader. Here's a slab, obviously. It is very durable, made of very hard plastic, sonically sealed, and it tells you exactly what the card is there on the top. It has the label. People then know it's authentic. It's easy to, put up on a shelf or up against a wall or on a table, whatever you want to do. So for aesthetics, display purposes, graded cards just look a little better. So that is probably the fourth reason that people grade. But now we're gonna get into the different grading companies, and there's three of them. Three main big ones that we're gonna talk about. So the big three grading companies, PSA, Beckett, GC. They all have different styles. As you can see, PSA has sort of the red box style with the label in there. On the back, you have the label on the top as well. Beckett does a much thicker card holder, so you can tell the difference in the thickness here is quite significant between Beckett and PSA. Beckett has their labels on the top as well. Really all of them have their labels on the top, but they have kind of these floating labels that look pretty cool. Beckett also gives you the option to have subgrades. I'll talk about that in a second. And then we have SGC, also kind of known as the tuxedo slab. Of course, all black. Their label also on the top. And SGC does this little SGC stamping on the back of the case, so you can only see the label from the front and not the back. So what's the difference between all these three? Well, believe it or not, different grading companies hold different value. PSA is kind of the gold standard of grading. PSA graded cards, a PSA 10 is worth more than an SGC 10, okay? A PSA Gem Mint grade is a Gem Mint 10. SGC's Gem Mint grade is a 10. But Beckett, and this is where it's gonna get a little confusing, but try to stay with me here. Beckett's version of a Gem Mint grade is actually a 9.5. So you can see 9.5 Gem Mint here. That is Beckett's version of this. Now Beckett does have 10s, but in order to get a 10, you need the subgrades to be a lot higher. You need, I think you need at least 3 10s on subgrades, or maybe it's all 4 need to be 10s to be a Beckett 10. Now, Beckett 10s are so rare. I think less than 1% of PSA 10s or something cross to a Beckett 10. Beckett 10s are worth more than a PSA 10, but the odds that you're getting it is so low that most people will just submit to PSA, because at the end of the day, your odds of getting a 10 are higher with PSA. And if PSA is already kind of the gold standard, then you're taking less risk with it. And so therefore PSA is the, generally speaking, #1 option to grade your cards. What is something that Beckett does that's kind of different than everyone else? You can see here that Beckett has what's called subgrades. So you can see there, centering has a grade, corners has a grade, edges has a grade, and surface has a grade. Now you pay extra to Beckett in order to do this, in order to have subgrades on your card. But it's a good way of knowing why you got docked certain points, I guess we could say, on a card, like why you got a 9 or why you got a 9.5. So the reason I know this one didn't get a Beckett pristine 10 is because I can see that these other subgrades were all 9.5s. They weren't 10s. And so a lot of people really like the transparency that comes with the Beckett subgrades. Now, PSA just announced that starting this month, I believe in a few days actually, they're gonna release grader notes. Now, this wasn't something that they did before, but grader notes is gonna tell you why your card graded a certain way. And that's gonna be a very, very big rollout for PSA. In terms of transparency, that's what people want. I think it's a huge step forward for PSA. It's not good news for Beckett because Beckett's kind of already falling behind in terms of how many cards they're grading. But grader notes is something that is coming out, so you will have more transparency in terms of why your card graded a certain way. Next, I want to talk about SGC, by the way. Not really the same kind of, it's not on the same level as PSA in terms of value for their slabs. They look nice, but they're heavier, they're thicker, just like the Beckett ones are heavier and thicker. If you have a lot of slabs in a case, it's honestly, to me, it's kind of PSA or bust, even just the weight difference. So you talk about value of the slab and the weight. I think PSA pound for pound punches above Beckett and SGC in my opinion. We are gonna talk to you a little bit about how to read the labels on the slab. So we'll use this as an example. You can see here on the first line, it's gonna tell you the set that the card is out of. So this is out of 2023 Prism. It'll tell you the player. This is Victor Wembanyama, obviously. It'll tell you, you see number 136 on the top right here. That is just the number of the card in the set. So you flip it over, you can see there number 136. So Victor was number 136 in this set. Not a super relevant number. But here is where you see the grade of the card. So this got a Gem MT10, that means Gem Mint 10. And here you see the serial number of the slab. You can log on to PSA's website and type that number in and it'll pop up a picture of this slab and I'll kind of authenticate it for you. So that's kind of the purpose of, again, like I talked about earlier, authenticating cards by using PSA to grade and slab cards. Of course, it does add value on the back. You have a QR code that you can scan if you don't want to type the number in. All these slabs have different security features as well. PSA does, it's very small, but you can see a little PSA logo on the holder there. They use this Lighthouse dual kind of holographic on their PSA hologram there, as well as, it's hard to see, but there's little PSAs above and below that PSA, and you can see the kind of the hologram in there as well. PSA on the slab one more time. But in terms of labels, we'll look at an SGC label. You kind of see the same thing. The year and the set, 2018 Topps Allen and Ginter X. Number 100, Shohei Ohtani. So it is, and that is the grade, 9.5. MT plus means mint plus, and you can see the certification number there. On the back of SGC slabs, we really don't see a whole lot. And then on Beckett, same thing, 2017 Topps Inception. That is the set that this came out of. Autograph patches, red is the card. You can see patch autograph, and it is red. And then you see the player there, Aaron Judge. Here's the grade, 9.5 Gem Mint. And there's the certification number right there. Beckett throws their autograph authentication on the back on the newer slabs. So this has the autograph graded as well. This got a 10 on the autograph. So that's kind of how you read the slab labels. What else do we need to get into? Grading modern cards and grading vintage cards is a little bit different. Obviously, you're trying to shoot for 10s. In every card grading company, no matter what, you're basically shooting for 10s. But vintage cards are a little different. Why? Because they're a lot older. So there's a lot more chance that they went through a lot of wear and tear. Okay, so I'm gonna bring a couple vintage cards on to the screen now. So you can see here, this is a 1978 Grand Slam Joe DiMaggio card, and he autographed this card here as well. So I'm gonna flip it over, show you guys the back, show you the front. So you can see the label, exactly what I talked about. Now you don't have to always get assigned a grade. Say you know the card's gonna grade poorly. Let's take this, for example. This graded a good, this graded a 2. The scale is 1 to 10, okay? It's a 1 to 10 scale. If you're below 1, it's typically graded as authentic, just like this. But it's also up to you whether you want your card to be a 2 or whether you want it to just say authentic. So I could tell you that this card, while it says authentic, this would not grade a 1. This would grade higher than a 1. But for the purposes of resale value, they preferred it to say authentic versus have like a 2 or a 1 on it. They did grade the autograph, it got a 10. And so basically what I'm getting at is vintage cards and grading cards, the number isn't all that tells the story when it comes to vintage. Let's specifically talk about this one. This is a 1948 Leaf Jackie Robinson rookie card in a PSA 2. So you might look at me and say, that's graded a 2. That must not be worth anything. Well, let me be the bearer of bad news, because this card in a PSA 2 is still worth over $8,000 in a 2, okay? So, like I said before, modern cards, you really kind of need the 10. You need kind of like a 9 or a 10 in the modern stuff, realistically. The vintage stuff, you don't, because it's a lot older. There's a little more leeway in the market and the prices for having lower grades. So grading modern versus vintage is not the same. It is not a like for like comparison. The cards are just so much older, and you can't expect 9s and 10s out of vintage cards, which is why, for example, the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle that has like 3 copies of a PSA 10 in existence, there's a reason why that card was worth $35 million or more, excuse me, whereas even Victor Wembanyama's 1 of 1 rookie PSA 10 black out of Prism this year, which I think the person who pulled it still has it. It's probably $1 million card, but there's a reason why it's not 35 or 40 million, and that's because it's from this year. And let's be honest, Victor Wembanyama hasn't really done anything besides what he's done in his rookie year, which, yeah, it was probably the best rookie basketball season of all time, but you get it. The older the card is, the more valuable it is, the more leeway you have on the grade being a 2, for example. I'm fine with this card being a 2. I still think it's amazing. The history of this card is amazing. So how much does this cost? How much does it cost to grade a card? Kind of depends if you're a member or not, at least for PSA. So PSA has a membership program. I want to say it's $149 a year. What does that give you access to? It gives you access to grading cards and taking advantage of their specials, usually like anywhere from $13, $14 a card, all the way up to maybe $18, $19 a card if you're a member. What's the turnaround time? Most of the turnaround times are, they're long. A month, 2 months sometimes. Now, keep in mind, you can pay extra to have the cards turned around faster, but you pay significantly more extra. So, by the way, if you're not a member, you're probably gonna pay like 25 bucks a card or something like that. But for example, you want an express turnaround, like 3 days or less or something, you probably pay 75 bucks or something like 75 bucks a card, something like that. So you can really get these turned around any way you want, in any speed you want, just kind of depends what you want to pay. Now, the majority of people don't pay the express because it usually outweighs the cost of the card. The majority of slabs that are being graded are not worth paying $75 to have them graded. What most people are doing that are basically buying raw cards and then submitting them to try and get a 10 and flipping them, what they kind of do is they look at the price of a PSA 10 and the price of a raw card and the price of a PSA 9, and if the cost to grade outweighs the cost, if the cost to grade is lower than the cost of the PSA 10 and they're pretty sure that that card will get a 10, then they send it in for grading, but standard service time, okay? So the turnaround time is kind of all up to you. Now, is it worth it to buy graded cards? Should I grade my cards? I think it's always worth it to buy graded cards. Unless you absolutely love raw cards like this, or you're fine with putting them in one-touch holders like this to kind of display them. If you care, if you're collecting just to collect and you don't really care about the value of anything, then I think fine, go for it. I think raw and one-touch holders is totally fine. But if you really care about the value of it, or you wanna diversify a little bit and invest a little bit of money in sports cards, the name of the game, guys, it isn't the card. The name of the game is condition. And the only way you can verify condition when you're buying online or buying in a store or buying anywhere is by buying graded cards. So yes, I think graded cards are worth it. I think it's worth it to grade your cards. How do you know if you should grade them? Well, you gotta look your cards up and you gotta know how much your card is worth in a PSA 10 versus a PSA 9 versus raw. To know whether it's worth it to pay the fee it costs and the shipping and insurance and all that stuff to actually grade the card. Now there's a lot of ways you could look up the values of your cards. I'm actually gonna do a whole episode about it in a few days about how to comp your cards, but that's basically the short crash course version of graded cards and what they are, why they get graded, who are the big graders, what are the turnaround times, how much does it cost. So hopefully you have a better idea now of what graded cards are all about. So we hope you join me for the next episode on how to comp your cards. That's a really, really big one, guys. How to comp your cards, make sure you know what the values are so you can accurately know whether you should grade it or how much you should sell it for or list it for on eBay, or what you should be buying it for if you find it in a shop, in a local shop, or even online. So until next time, we'll see you right back here at Hollywood Rips. Mr. Hollywood, out.